Sometimes it didn't seem that God was really present with me.
I know Jesus is there, I know God is with me, but I couldn't really feel Him.
God at times can seem silent.
I'm Steve Aubrey. As Christians, we believe that God hears our prayers and is always with us. But many people reach a point in their lives when it feels like God is no longer present to them. During these difficult periods, faith can wither and the spiritual life may seem impossible. How do we survive these times and keep faith in God who sustains us? Stay tuned as we explore When God Seems Silent.
Something should feel right in you when you come into a church and you're feeling lonely and you're feeling broken and you're feeling denied and you're feeling like nobody understands. It's at that stage that God and you should get
Garth
into
Kasimu
fellowship
Baker
with one
Fletcher
another.
is part-time pastor of Grace United Methodist Church in Pasadena, California. He's also an associate professor at the School of Theology at Claremont. His lifelong battles with physical illness have caused him to wonder why it is that sometimes God seems silent.
Probably the first time that I thought that God was really being silent in my life was right after a time where God had been very active in my life and I had been very full of the sense of God's presence. And it was an exciting point in my life. I was 15, I was a part of a Christian young people's fellowship, and these people were studying the Bible, and we had a very active, lively sense of God's presence. I thought it was amazing that at that point then I contracted this condition and the doctors could not find out what it was. And I'll never forget when they told me at the age of 15, 8 doctors came in white suits, and they formed this semicircle around the bed, and they looked at me with grim faces, and they said, "Son, you have a condition," and they said the name of it. It was systemic lupus erythematosus. And in 1972, they had no way of knowing what to do with it. So they just said to me out front, "You have a serious case of this condition, and we do not expect you to live past the age of 25. And little did I know that that would begin a life of being in and out of hospitals every 3 to 4 months until I was about the age of 29. I had friends that had been in that initial prayer group that I talked to you about who came and they asked me point blank, "Garth, what sins have you committed? Surely this suffering that you're going through must be something that you've done. You have to find out what that sin is." And so I was lying up there in a hospital bed with IVs in my arms to keep me hydrated and keep me alive, and going through my life like a sieve. What did I do wrong? Who did I hurt? How did I hurt them? How can I get in touch with them now and make it right? I was just going through this process. Sometimes it didn't seem that God was really present with me. Sometimes it just seemed like I was just holding on by the skin of my teeth and just trying to see my way through. And then when it was finished, when the pain was over, when the sense of loss of self was over, when the sense of just being utterly abandoned and being lonely in this place. It wasn't my fault that I had this lupus, and that no matter how hard I prayed, it didn't seem to go away. So then the only choice that was left, if I was going to still believe in a God, and that was a big if, but if I was still going to believe in God, if I was still going to have faith and be a loving person, not a cynical person, ultimately cynical person, then I had to find some relationship with God where the condition was still a part of my life. Sometimes some of the things in our lives are things that we can't escape, and that we have to go through them, and that somehow, some strange way, our faith is going to be made stronger in it, and our witness of faith to others is going to be more powerful. We're going to be more inspirational. We'll be more of a conduit of God's Spirit and grace. And that's amazing to me. It's really an astonishing aspect of the Christian faith.
Witnessing Reverend Baker Fletcher's struggles has made it easier for his congregation to see personal crises as part of their own spiritual journeys.
For me, it was about 3 years ago, and I was having open heart surgery. I had triple bypass, and I had a lot of questions about why this was happening and what direction God was trying to point me in and the types of things that He's trying to show me. Since the surgery, I feel that my prayers have probably been more fervent, and the answers, I think, have been greater. And I've been able to see a greater connection between what's going on in my life and where His hand has been.
For whatever reason you're going through this, and it doesn't matter, you won't know right now. Whatever the pain is, whatever the loss is, whatever the crisis is, and however you feel about yourself and how much you might want to give up, God is working even this thing, even this dark thing, this horrible thing, even this twisted thing, into some type of wonderful pattern in your life. And in the end, it will become something that might even be central to your ministry and witness. And so there's hope. There's light at the end of the tunnel. There's a way to lift up our heads.
God, I thought, was very silent about a month and a half ago when I had some different problems with my marriage. I was able to go to God, but I was kind of mad. You know, I said, hey, you know, this is something, I feel like I've tried to be a good, you know, Christian, and you know, I've not abandoned you, you know, really. I mean, I maybe set you aside a little bit, but I didn't abandon you, and here you're abandoning me.
It is not always easy to trust and to know and to believe God is here with us. But that doesn't mean that God isn't. They cried to the Lord in
Philip
their
Deming
trouble.
is a deacon at Calvary Lutheran Church in San Diego. With his additional duties as a hospital chaplain, Deacon Deming sees many people who feel God is no longer concerned about them.
In all His ways. God is with us. God has promised to be with us always. Certainly whenever two or more are gathered in worship, but also individually, God has such a passion for us and desire to be with us. He's never away from us. My own feelings and my own understanding and experience is that it's us blocking ourselves off from being able to experience God. We kind of build up walls between ourselves and the presence of God that doesn't mean God's not there, but we're really not in a place where we can feel God. And I think that's where we move into the spiritual dryness of life.
I still haven't received, you know, any closure from that, but I've gotten some other enrichment in my life from just these prayers, as far as I found a lot of loving people in our congregation, and I found a lot of people that I was embarrassed and afraid to come to them or to be, you know, amongst them, and it was, all of it became a blessing, because I feel a lot closer to a lot of other people.
Body and spirit, make whole that which is broken. Send now your Holy Spirit to share, to exchange, to pray for one another. Often I think in this culture we are so independent and so strong that God is answering us through another person that we're just not hearing because we want to be independent.
And it's at those moments, I don't think that we should do anything but call on other people of faith. And I think that their faith is what carries us. Sometimes we don't have enough personal faith to live through moments like that. Sometimes we just need to reach out and ask somebody else to help carry you, because your spiritual legs are too fragile, and your heart has just given out on yourself, and your mind seems to be in a fog.
I know Jesus is there. I know God is with me, but I couldn't really feel Him.
For a while, Sarah Canton felt God was being silent when she learned she had breast cancer.
It was a Monday night, about 7:30, and the doctor called, and she said, in a rather apologetic tone, that yes, it was cancer. And right then, my life came to a halt. I didn't hear anything else she said. I just heard the word cancer, and I was just frozen. Certainly I prayed, but it was like just random, oh, help me, God, and what can I do now? But it wasn't really a connection there, and I didn't really feel like he was there. I didn't feel like I was there. I was terrified of everything ahead. The fear of the unknown, the surgery, the chemotherapy, just everything was terrifying. And one night I decided to go online and wondered if there were any support groups. And I found a breast cancer support group. I had never posted a message to a message board, and I just was frantic. I thought, I need help if there's anybody out there. And so I wrote a frantic message, and the next morning I came down and there were over 85 emails for me. And this was so overwhelming. I really felt like these people were angels in cyberspace that had surrounded me. And that was kind of the first feeling of being close to a person and to God. And I felt, okay, they're all there with their prayers. They're telling me to pray. They're telling me to go with God, and He'll be there. And I didn't feel like He was there. And one woman said, God will be holding your hand. And I thought, well, I don't feel like He's holding my hand, but I'm going to believe you. And then from there, all of a sudden, people in town, friends, began to know the news that I did have cancer, and I was bombarded with acts of kindness. I saw this flyer for a retreat, and so I decided to go. But when I got there, it turned out to be a silent retreat. So I thought, oh, okay, what am I doing here? And then I sat down at the first session, and the retreat director, she said, well, I hope everybody here can find God. I want you all to find God. I want you to have a glimpse of Jesus. And so I thought, that's why I'm here. That's what I want. One night I was sitting and having dinner, and of course we were all silent, and one of the nuns, who was a cook in the back, came out, and there were 30 women there, and she came up to me and she put her arm on me and she said, you know, you can put an intention in the book at the front of the chapel, and we'll pray for you, and we will pray for you forever. And then she just walked away, and I thought, I was so moved by that. I didn't know why she picked me out, and I thought, well, this is my glimpse of Jesus. So from then on, I came, it was like a revelation. I realized that all these acts of kindness and all these people coming out of nowhere, it was really God was coming. So I was getting back to Him through them.
For hundreds of years, Christians have tried to understand why God seems silent at certain times of our lives.
Teresa of Avila and St. John of the Cross in the Catholic churches back in the medieval times, they called it that. They called it the dark night of the soul, when the sense of God's presence is intentionally removed by God. The increase of faith came because our longing for God, our hungering for that presence, and our sense of thirsting after God is increased when the sense of easy access to God is removed.
I went through a phase where it seemed like everything that was meaningful and pleasurable to me was taken out of my life. And, you know, I felt sad and depressed.
Kathleen Tischhauser is a psychiatric nurse who has personally experienced what St. John of the Cross termed the dark night of the soul.
A lot more than that. It was more of a dark night of spirit or a dark night of soul. And the difference between clinical depression and a dark night of spirit or soul is that in the dark night, you know God is there and you know God is directing it. And I always knew that. I always had this sense of His guiding me and taking me through this journey or process that I was going through, as painful as it was. Love and compassion were what I really wanted to learn about, what I really wanted to incorporate into my life, and I didn't really know how. And so as I prayed, I was moved into these experiences of darkness that were very painful, that taught me about compassion and love and suffering. And my only prayer at that time was just, Lord, teach me to love. That's all I care about. And as I've moved through these places, I realized that my prayer was answered.
Many people today find various techniques helpful to quiet their busy lives and hear the small, still voice of God. Sister Pat Hansen and Sister Millicent Peasley run La Providencia, a spiritual retreat center in Alpine, California. People come to them from all backgrounds, hoping to more clearly learn God's will for their lives. Sisters Pat and Millie have built a replica of a labyrinth found in the cathedral in Chartres, France. For believers seeking a deeper faith, the labyrinth symbolizes the spiritual journey. For the person who walks it, the labyrinth can still the mind and bring clear recognition of the reality of God's love.
We've been wanting to do this for many years. We found out about it several years ago, and we knew that it was connected with a journey. In fact, one of the things that we encourage people to do is that just before they enter the labyrinth, that they let go of any expectations that they have about walking it, or any burdens that they are carrying.
Very often the people will find, as they walk the labyrinth, we'll see them crying. We know something deep has surfaced in their life. Maybe they've never been quiet enough to face it. Just like the prophet Elijah found God in a still, whispering voice, so today people can find God in silence, where they're attentive. It doesn't mean that they'll hear voices or hear God speaks, but God is spirit, so God speaks in silence. And a person knows when they have received that message from God. They just know it within themselves.
In today's world where we have freeways, we think our journeys are fast and there are rest stops in between. I think in a spiritual journey, the analogy of those long, dusty walks in desert places are probably much more real for what our spiritual walks are. There's no shortcut in our journey with God. Rather, I think God says, wherever you walk, I'll walk too. And that if, in fact, you are walking now in a painful and dry-blown, silent place, I'll walk silently with you.
God often seems silent, and this can be especially frustrating for people of faith. But as Christians, we should trust in the mystery of God's ways, which are not always like our ways. Even if it feels like we can't experience God's presence at times, we can take hope and comfort in the Bible's promise that all things work together for good for those who love God.